Thanks for watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good evening, educators, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Twilight show. We are live on Teachers Talk Radio this evening, and we have got quite a big topic that we're going to talk about, and we're going to debate, and we're going to do what we like to do as teachers, which is talking shop, maybe having a little bit of a moan, but we're going to try and be, we're going to try and be balanced with what we say. I think I've got a feeling I might know which way that we might go. I've been looking online, I've been looking on social media, and there's quite a lot of anger about this. And for once, I think I heard someone say somewhere, for once, it's nice that teachers are sort of almost united in their anger and their concern and their frustration at the new framework. And so I've got Yannick back. Yannick has returned again. I just want to thank Yannick very much for coming on once again. And it will be interesting. We're expecting John Ball to join us as well. We'll see if he pops in. He may well have been held up. But we've got plenty that we can talk about. So it will be, we'll be reuniting the three of us after our chat some months back before Christmas, I believe. I think it was before Christmas, Yannick, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we were sort of looking ahead to the new framework. And at the time, it was when it had just been announced. We didn't really know a lot of details about it. And obviously now we've got to a point where several schools have had an inspection under the new framework. Obviously, we had a period where schools put themselves forward for those inspections, which would have meant, I think, that those schools would have probably been in quite an advantageous position already, and quite a confident position already. So obviously those early or those inspections that came in before the official rollout would have gone, I think, quite well, which maybe lulled us into a bit of a false sense of security, because obviously once it's opened up to the whole range of schools in different contexts, and context is a really big thing. There's so much we can talk about. I mean, we're not going to fit everything into the hour that we want to talk about, so it may well be that we do another show. And I've been really trying, honestly, to get someone on who I think might be able to talk from a position of not necessarily defending Ofsted, but or a different, giving a different point of view, because obviously as a Teachers Talk Radio show, we want a balanced perspective. So obviously I'm going to be trying to put forward an alternative view at certain points. It's not all terrible that people are saying, but the one of the main things people are saying is fundamentally the impact on schools certainly doesn't seem to have eased in terms of mental health and mental health of leaders. And Yannick and I were talking just before we went on air, just about how the knock-on effects of that. It can't be a healthy time to be a head teacher, to be quite honest. And I see, what my current head teacher deals with, and you do feel for head teachers, because they're having to not only manage their own mental health and stress, but obviously taking it from every single angle as well, not being able to switch off. Yeah, heck of a tough job. And big shout out to people who do it, first of all. But anyway, so we're here to talk about the framework. So I entitled the show, along the lines of what Martyn Oliver said. We will not acquiesce to the quiet curse of low expectations. It sounds good in a speech, doesn't it? the downside of it is it meant I had to go away and learn how to spell acquiesce. And I'm sure John Bald will tell me later whether I've got it right or not. So hopefully he'll arrive at some point and not say, actually, you spelled acquiesce wrong. But yeah, so yeah, we'll get into it. I just want to mention that this show is sponsored by a couple of very good sponsors, and our long-term sponsors of the show are publishers of professional development books and resources. And this is Hachette Learning, guys. Hachette Learning are our sponsors, and this show is brought to you in partnership with them. And they support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So if you want to level up your professional development today, you can visit www.hachettearning.com to explore the full range of titles. And AQA are the second sponsors of our show, AQA. I've used AQA plenty in the past. I'm actually switching back over to AQA after our school has been with EdXL. If you're ready to make an impact beyond the classroom, AQA is looking for teachers like you to become examiners this summer. You'll build your CPD, strengthen your understanding of the mark scheme, gain fresh insights to enhance your teaching. It's flexible paid work that fits around your commitments, with full training from our experts and ongoing support from an experienced team leader. Whether you're an early careers teacher or have years of classroom experience, examining with AQA is a valuable way to develop your knowledge and join a community of subject specialists. Join AQA as an examiner this summer. Visit aqa.org/apply today. So do that today if you're interested in becoming an examiner with AQA. And while we're talking about AQA, just this one last point about AQA. We know, or AQA know, that teachers are the real experts in the classroom, which is why they work closely with teachers, combining your insight with their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training and guidance that genuinely make a difference. They're the UK's most chosen assessment organisation, so chances are you already know their work. And as we head into exam season, AQA are focused on helping teachers feel supported and ready. If you want to find out more about how they're working with teachers like you, just head over to their website. So that's AQA, guys. So let's get into it then, Yannick. I did just hear my phone buzz, so it might be that John's trying to come in. So I will try and keep half an eye on that, but I'm not seeing anything at the moment. So hopefully we will see John soon. But what do you think? Let's start with what Martyn Oliver said, Yannick. We will not acquiesce to the quiet curse of low expectations. So what do you think about Martyn Oliver's sort of approach to the concerns that have been raised?
Well, I mean, Martyn came from Outwood, and I think when Outwood started, there was exactly that. It was making sure that every child mattered, and then there was no excuse for poor results in those areas. So I understand where he comes from. Now, he personally hasn't achieved any of that when he took over, Martyn Oliver. That's got to be said, actually. When he took over, that's when his school started to have a few required to improve. So he's not really in a great position to be saying that. And the problem I have is these are words waffle. The problem is that as you said, we have a judgment that impacts on school, on people's lives, and that is not great. A published judgment. And can I start with that very nasty quote for me, which I've seen, which I thought, that an athlete won't judge you for working out, millionaire won't judge you for starting a business, a musician won't judge you for trying to sing a song. It's always people going nowhere that have something to say. That's them. That's them. They judge. They come in a school, couple of days, they judge. That's such an easy job. I can do it. You can do it. And we got to be careful, because obviously I understand that. I understand the need, the need to monitor, to check the quality of teaching. But is that what we're getting? Since I am am a trained professional, right? I'm a professional, and my school tells me I've got to mark in pink. I mean, but I am a professional. I've got to dress with a tie and a suit. I go to school, I teach, but my school say you have to mark using a pink pen. Really? Me?
Yeah, pink.
What other
Yeah,
job has got that kind of constraint? You
Yeah.
need to use a pink pen, because if you
Yeah.
don't, you'll be put on a support plan. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a joke, is it? It has happened. I've seen it.
It has happened. Yeah, and because there's a couple, off the back of that, a couple of things. Absolutely, we're professionals. We should be treated as such. We should be empowered as such. And I think a lot of that stress that I mentioned earlier, that's on leaders, manifests as approaches that are highly prescriptive. So they're thinking, right, what if we get everyone doing this? What if we get everyone to make their PowerPoint look like this, to have this slide, and to do this task, and to have this structure to the lesson? And obviously, we all know that lessons should have a good structure, but it seems to be like that trust. They want to peel away the trust from us, but still leave us with all the responsibility.
Yeah.
So it's one or the other, isn't it? It's either you've appointed us to this role as professionals and we're empowered and trusted to do the job, or you're going to top down micromanage everything that we do, and not give us that professional freedom to be able to sort of to do it how we see fit.
So look at what I have found for this program. I dug far in my files. Now, my first job in 2000, I started in a school called Walgate School. I was newly qualified teacher. September, the head of department had an accident and she wasn't there, so we got OFSTED, I think, in November. And I can you see this? Is it reversed?
I can nearly see. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, this is my career. Okay. So so in confidence, profile of the quality of teaching, individual record, Yannick Berland, school name, blah blah blah, teacher's name, Mr. Yannick Berland, year group, I was in with year 12. I got good. So you can see there. That's it. There's the ticks. Got good with year 12. I got satisfactory with year 8 French, and unsatisfactory with year 9 Spanish.
Okay.
That is what, that hasn't changed much, as it's changed a little bit, but this is what, a piece of paper telling someone who's had like 2 months experience, that's the quality of my teaching. Someone who came like 15 minutes in each of my lessons, right? No question. I didn't talk to these people. They just came and then got that piece of paper. That's OFSTED. That was OFSTED. Registered inspector, Mr. Drew, in confidence. And the head got this as well, of course. So for the head, that's who I was. I was a guy. I mean, I was lucky. Yeah. I got a good satisfactory, There was excellent and very good as well. Excellent, very good. Good, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, poor, very poor, and all you got is a cross.
You got your tick.
What a nice job.
And that sums you up, yeah. And that's
me. That's me at the start of my career. And do you know?
I would have taken that at the start of my career. I've got to say, I would have taken that. But but it's summarising. Yeah, this is the thing. So, it's numbers, it's grades, it's
change this to the name of the school. This school is rubbish, right? Yeah. But that's in the paper. Everybody knows it. That's great, isn't it? That's great. Parents see that. Everybody sees that, and then probably people won't read the whole report because it's tedious. But they will know that the school is RI, and of course go. It's hard. It's just hard after that to work to improve that, when the damage, reputation is one of the hardest. We sit in the media with people, when your reputation is damaged, wow, And we don't need that, do we? We don't need that. The kids don't need that.
Yeah, that's absolutely devastating to a school, isn't it? Because reputation, again, quite often schools and schools are pitched against each other. I mean, I did a little bit of research on this, and I'm not sure if it's true, but I think we might be one of the few countries that have league tables that compare nationally. I'm not sure whether others do, or maybe they do. But what we're obsessed with is measuring things.
Yeah.
We're obsessed with measuring things in the UK. And eventually someone is going to have to sit down and realize that it's not working. And obviously, it's going to take bravery. I said this on X. I say a lot of things on X. I've been ranting a bit on X.
Yeah.
So sorry if I'm boring anyone. But it's one of those things that it just doesn't seem to be changing. It's going to take a very brave politician to actually say, right, let's get rid of this. I mean, I don't want to make this political, but I mean, for example, the Green Party said that Ofsted would be gone, I believe, in their manifesto. So, I mean, it's obviously there's that balance, isn't there? It's like you said, Yannick, there needs to be some accountability.
Yeah, I think the problem as well we've got in the government is that, people change, but the civil servants are staying. They're protecting their jobs. It's like if everything is changing, they're still there in power doing the same thing. You can see that they're the same people. They don't. It's everywhere the same as well. The civil servants who you never see them, you never hear of them, but they're here doing their jobs, not changing anything because it's their job, And then you'll always have some mate who'll be. There'll always be someone to take on these jobs because it's good money, isn't it? And I know they say, we got to be, we got to have 4 days in a hotel. Okay, all right.
Yeah, but they want us to change. They want us to change and transform everything. I've put down a few things on this list to try and sort of keep focused, but usually we'll go off on a few things. But one of the things that came out, I mean, I looked at some opinions, and I've also looked at the toolkit. I've had a quick look at the toolkit that Ofsted use because everything is published now by Ofsted, which I suppose is a bit more transparent. So they've published, I think, their training materials. They've published the toolkit that they use to make the judgments, which I'll talk about in a bit as well. But it's this thing about disadvantaged schools. So one of the main concerns, so again, I had a look online about what the main concerns are at the moment, and that keeps coming up. The influence of the new framework on disadvantaged schools, or whether they are being unfairly penalised in terms of achievement. Now, again, I can't say too much about my experience of recently being through the framework because it's not in the public domain. But I can talk generally, and I do feel very much that is true. The outcomes do seem to be back a little bit. I don't think they ever fully went away, and I don't know if it was maybe to do with the lockdown, but it seems to be that under a previous incarnation, there was a little bit of common sense coming in around having a bit less focus on outcomes and this understanding that if there's good curriculum and teaching and learning happening and the behaviour is reasonable or improving, then that will lead to better outcomes in the future. But we do seem to have gone back to falling back on outcomes. Now, I might be being unfair with that, and I do actually have the descriptors that's in the Ofsted toolkit for outcomes, which I'll maybe look at or read in a minute, but not the whole descriptors, but I actually printed out what the descriptions are for the needs attention. My understanding is how Ofsted do the framework is, or how do the inspection is, they assume that you are, expected standard. They assume you're expected standard until obviously they then have calls to start seeing that you're not hitting those bullet points, and it's a secure fit. And well, while I'm on that, I'll just mention that. So we've got this thing, I don't know if you know about this, Yannick, it's called a secure fit rather than a best fit.
Yeah.
So what that means is they've got to hit a particular bullet points in expected standard, and if the school doesn't hit all those bullet points to the satisfaction of the inspection team or lead inspector, then they will drop them down a grade just for not hitting one of those bullet points that's in the secure fit. So I don't know. What you think. What you think about that?
It's always very tricky. I mean, of course, we all know that the outcomes are important, and I think I agree with that. So basically, what they're saying is that everybody, every single student in the country should have the same chance and should have achieved the best of their outcome. Of course, that's an ideal one, and there's no place for complacency and all that. Yeah, again, a very easy thing to say. Everybody deserves the same chance. Now, of course, when you look at it, you and me, I've moved now actually, because it was, at the end of the day, I'll admit it was too hard to work in places like that, in RI schools, because what do you do at some point? It's very easy to say the outcomes aren't there, yes, but you're right. It seems that at the end of the day, that's the only thing they're looking at, because that's the only thing that you can see in numbers. The rest is a bit waffle, isn't it? So yeah, the inclusion, all this, again, big words. What the inclusion? So even if they see stuff they like, if the outcomes are not good, it's still not gonna be good enough. So this, and it's always the schools that are in deprived area that are struggling, of course, and. It is quite disappointing that they and I think you're absolutely right. It's quite disappointing to see that there doesn't seem to be. We're still going back to single word judgment, whereas we should be looking at everything, and not have that, looking at everything and making some comments. I don't like the word judgment, but some kind of judgment, but not. Here he is coming.
Sorry.
Hello, John. Good evening.
I'm behind a closed road. I'm sorry about that. But
no worries at all.
And thank you for your patience.
Not a problem. No, we thought we would just obviously get started and because if you get held up, you get held up. That's how things go. So thank you for coming on again, John. Yannick and I were just talking about, we just sort of started to get into it, really. We were talking about the focus on outcomes, and I was just making the point that it feels like we've gone a little bit more back towards a focus on outcomes when we'd started to move very slightly away from that focus. Now, I don't know, it might have just been my imagination. Outcomes have obviously been important. I want to talk in a minute and ask you both about whether you think low expectations is a problem. Is there really leaders or teachers with low expectations? They may be some, but is that genuinely a problem, or is it the issue with context? But yeah, I'm jumping around lots of topics, but what do you think about that, John? What do you think about outcomes? Is there more focus on outcomes now?
I think they're trying to ride so many horses at once that they're in danger of falling off. You've got to be able to ride two horses, otherwise you're not worth your place in the circus, as somebody once said. But they're trying to ride a lot of different horses at once here. And I've been discussing this with some previous HMI. I've never been an HMI. I was a registered inspector, a lead inspector. I wasn't an HMI. I want to make that clear. An HMI before Ofsted never used to use grades at all. They used the English language. And they wrote an honest report on what they found. Now, that obviously is going to include what the children are achieving, because if they're not achieving anything, we've got a problem. But it also allowed them to write about the context of the school. And at one point, when Sir Michael Tomlinson was the chief inspector, he actually understood that in London schools there was a particular problem with high pupils turnover. People were moving around a lot. And we were told, well, right, you take that into account when you're writing your report. But they didn't used to use grades. Before 1992, HMI never did.
Yeah.
They went and they wrote a report on what they found. And if they didn't find evidence, they didn't say anything. So I think we need to return to something like that.
Because at the end of the day, sorry, John.
Sorry, please, Tony. Sorry.
No, sorry. I was just going to point out, and Yannick mentioned, I think, as well, we've moved away from the one-word judgment, obviously, which we agreed on the last show before Christmas, so that was the right thing to do. But obviously, Yannick just sort of alluded to the fact that people aren't going to necessarily read word for word the report. So what they're probably going to do is look at the colours. And obviously, we've got colour coding and orange. So it's what do they call that category? Needs attention. So
well,
needs
what
attention.
I call it. I call it TripAdvisor.
Yeah.
Inspection report. This is TripAdvisor. It's
and
simple.
that seems to be what they want, or that they've told us that parents want. I mean, maybe that is what's in the back of their mind. You know, we all look at a review. If I'm going to buy, I don't know, a car from a particular dealer, I'll look. Oh, so is that really sort of being driven by that's what the parents want? So
I agree with John there. As I saw that tweet there. So TripAdvisor, yeah, it is, isn't it? With the lights, and people see that, and that's it. It's the same, isn't it? It's just orange. That's you.
You see, the thing is that we're not dealing with a trip. We're dealing with 5 years of somebody's life. If you send your child to a secondary school or even a primary school, you know, 5-7 years, and it's not nuanced enough. That's the problem.
You are wrong, John. This is the learning journey.
Oh,
so
the learning journey.
It is a trip.
Learning journey. Sorry, I stand corrected.
It is a trip. It is a trip.
It's true.
No, well,
yeah, it is.
But it's a long trip. That's all I'm saying. I think basically the bottom line on this is that they're trying to produce a series of 10 judgments of a 2-day visit with not enough people to get the evidence to substantiate the judgments. Now,
Yes,
I've
absolutely.
had, and I've never enjoyed it, but I have had to make the judgment that a school was failing. And I can tell you that the inspector sitting around that table did not enjoy doing that. But you had to do it sometimes because the children were not getting the education they should have been getting.
Yeah.
But we've been in the place for 4 days or 5, not 2. And we'd had a pre-inspection visit, which was actually the same as a day's inspection is now. So the problem is that they haven't got enough evidence to be able to make their judgments with confidence. They're not even reporting on English and maths. This is the problem. They're not getting enough evidence to do that. There's no way to inspect a school. That's the bottom line, and it hasn't been for a long time.
They seem to have been driven by this this issue of the attainment gap between obviously disadvantage. They're using the word disadvantaged, and everyone else, which we can agree is a pretty stark difference. So you can understand to the focus on that. But obviously, is there enough nuance there? So they look at this, the IDSR. And there's a context. All schools have a context, right? And what bothers me about context is if you're only looking at free school meals and maybe some socio-economic factors or whatever you're looking at, that doesn't tell the whole story.
No.
So you could live in an area work in an area where it's very hard to recruit. It could be a rural area. It could be a coastal area. It could be nowhere near London, and people would prefer to work in London and get extra London fringe or and so on. I went to a school in Harlow, and that's what they said. We can't get teachers because they'd rather drive another half an hour and get more money.
Well, that was a huge problem at one point, and this is the time when the tire hit the road. Because all of the schools in the outer London belt were having trouble recruiting staff because people wanted the inner London allowance, and schools were failing and unable to recruit. And I actually led the inspection of one of the schools that was really at the sharp end of this, because the head was a very, very good head and a really good person. And some of her staff were brilliant head of science, really superb deputy, but they were getting people in that you couldn't understand. And I mean, this is not necessarily an ethnic thing. I just could not understand what some of the people were saying. The staffing was so bad that children are lucky if they got one music lesson every 3 weeks. The head of science, that was this brilliant teacher, had to split himself up so thinly to make up for other people's inability to do the work that the school was just totally inadequate. And that's not the staff, well, certainly not the heads, not the permanent staff's fault. But what they had said to me was, if I don't have these people, if I send them back, they'll just come back on the road the next week because there's nobody else.
It's mad. So, I mean, yeah. And the other thing I've found is I was at a school that went into special measures, as I think I've mentioned before. And that was the right decision. 100% was the right decision from Ofsted to do that. But the point is that one of the real issues that we had around that time, there was a bit of an exodus of staff for various reasons. I'm not even sure because it was before I joined the school. But there was quite a big exodus. And the problem then is the recruitment, if it's a problem, you end up with a lot of temporary staff.
Yes.
And the sort of students that in disadvantaged areas, I think, certainly the students I work with in a very disadvantaged area, and John knows where it is, we're not going to say go into it, but they need an adult they can trust, an adult they know well.
Yes.
And the massive problem we had is they were going from pillar to post from different teacher every week in say maths particularly, and by the time they came to us, they were just all over. They were unteachable because they were surviving. They were having to survive, getting through the day. And it took them a long, long time. And I can't really say I blame them at the time. It took them a long time to get to trust in any way the teacher in front of them.
How could they? How could they? Just very quickly on this.
Go on, John.
I remember being in a maths GCSE class, a top set, 3 months before they were taking their GCSEs. And this teacher was at the front. I couldn't understand anything that he was doing. Neither could they. And the girl, a conscientious girl, looked at me and she gave me a look that said, if you can't do anything about this, who can? And that stayed with me, and that is 20 years ago.
And
I think, at some point, like you're talking about maybe 5-10 years ago, when Ofsted gave those word judgment, was also the political idea that if a school was RI, they could be taken over by maths, which could pour in the resources, the staff, the structures, and all this. Now, I mean, as it worked, I think it has worked to some extent. I think. I don't know. What do you think? That was the idea that. So they were very quick to give schools actually RI or that kind of thing. So these schools could have no choice.
And that led to the Caversham tragedy, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because the unfortunate thing is that the first thing a lot of these mats did was go in and decapitate and just professionally end the head's career, which is absolutely outrageous. It's just the whole thing has turned into a shambolic tyranny. And I know that the present chief inspector he means well. He's improved the manners. The inspectors are more polite. They are more sympathetic, and the threat of an immediate sack has gone from the head. They're not doing that to them anymore, and thank goodness for that, because we do not want any more of this. But unfortunately, they haven't managed to get the balance right, doing right by the children and doing right by the staff and writing a fair.
I think it's hard. It's hard.
It is hard.
If it was so easy, people would do it. Yeah, but it's interesting that, I mean. Yeah, from the point of view of as a staff, it's hard to to be judged.
What's interesting is to think about to the extent that they have actually listened, because to me it seems like they've just it's rearranging the deck chairs is the great analogy, isn't it? So it doesn't feel like they had an opportunity, didn't they, with the big listen? They had an opportunity there to really show some reforms and some changes. And I think you're right to some extent, John, that there is more collegiate. There is more of a sense of a collegiate approach.
I think
they are working with schools rather than seen to be pitted against schools. So I do feel that is one of the things that came out of when I looked at what other people are saying just across the board. Obviously, there's a lot of anger about the impact in terms of disadvantaged students. Some are saying, fair. Some are saying fair acknowledgement of disadvantage. Others say this stance risks reinforcing negative judgment, especially where socio-economic factors heavily influence achievement. I think it's very hard to understand a community by looking at a set of numbers on a graph or spreadsheet, because you can't. There's all sorts of issues in a community which are very hard to understand. I think there's issues such as local schools, if they have a better reputation, which is why reputation is so important. If enough parents who have the nous cotton on to the fact that they can make choices, then there's grammar schools. There's schools in areas. I work in an area where there are grammar schools close by. You've got the issue of them creaming off the higher attaining students.
Yes,
and
big issue where you are.
It's the reputational damage as well, isn't it? So, I mean, do you believe we'll ever? They're talking about context, and they're talking about what is it? Inclusion. So, I don't know. It's kind of. I don't know if it's really helping, and people are saying, yeah, it says here, school leaders have warned the new framework's achievement wording and reporting system may penalise schools serving disadvantaged communities. And then there's been some statistics that went out, and I've got them here, I think somewhere. I've got so many pieces of paper, and I'd actually looked at these statistics. It says here, 2 out of 19 schools that were low or very low free school meals, 11% were graded needs attention, whereas 16 out of 40, which is 40% of the high or very high free school meals, were graded needs attention or below.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some people will say, well, obviously the people who don't like Ofsted are going to be the schools that don't do well in Ofsted. But do you think there is a genuine? Do you think there is something in this concern about the implication of schools in disadvantaged areas? Do you think that's a genuine?
I've worked in these schools. I've taught in these schools. When I was teaching in London, I was teaching in some of the roughest schools in London. One of them has been closed and reopened at least 3 times. And I do understand that it is more difficult for them to recruit the right teachers. Now, why is that? Is it because of our recruitment system? I mean, for example, I've also worked in France, not extensively, but I've worked in France, and in France, teachers get nominated to schools. So if you have, a certain level of qualification, the school gets its share. The top grade is called the acquiesce in France. I suppose it would be something like a first-class honours degree or something like that. So just a rough equivalent. Well, the school gets its share of those. You'll get 12 of them. If you want to work in Paris, you go and work in that school. The heads don't pick their own staff. Now, that actually probably creates some problems, but it doesn't avoid the fact it does have this much democracy that a school gets its share of the top qualified teachers. Pardon my poor grammar for a second. So they get their share of the best qualified teachers, not necessarily the best teachers, but the best qualified. So that the kind of situation that you experienced and that I experienced in that school, with a huge turnover of temporary teachers, some of which the head wouldn't have chosen to employ, was causing instability. That they don't have that. They've got other problems instead. But perhaps the idea of actually getting, if a school is in trouble, having teams of teachers who have what used to be called advanced skills. I thought that was an excellent idea, and it's a pity it got ditched, because the advanced skilled teachers were almost always teaching to a very good or excellent standard. But Ofsted don't look at the teaching. They don't have enough time to. I mean, you've been a head of department. Heads of department has said that they haven't really had very much involvement. And even the head of maths and science. I mean, schools, most of the secondary schools' work is in subjects. And Ofsted doesn't even look at it.
Yeah, they seem to have moved away from that, didn't they? After the deep dives are gone, and now they've moved a little bit more general. Yes. It seems to me now, what I noticed that they did now, and I had a little look at the toolkit and the documentation, the guidance that they use for inspectors. I didn't read it word for word, but it was interesting that they choose, I think, 6 students to effectively follow around.
Not a bad idea in itself.
Students of different groups, so one pupil premium and English as additional language, and maybe one who's been a looked after student. Yeah, looked after child. Sorry, John, did you say that's a good idea? Or
that is a good idea, because HMI used to do that. They called it pupil pursuit, and it was a way for an HMI to get a view of exactly what a pupil's week was. So they would stay with that pupil, obviously looking at the rest of the class as well. You know, they'd be writing subject reports and lesson reports, but they would actually be keeping a separate evidence form on that pupil's school experience every week. In itself, it's a good thing to do. But if it's not the only thing you do, that's the problem. I mean, there's not enough time actually looking at what the children are getting.
Yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah, so it's their experience then, isn't it? So yeah, that bit does definitely make sense to me. To get that sort of contextual experience. They're also triangulating a lot. I think there is more student voice than there was, and there's more looking at books than there was. But I just want to make a point on that, actually, because one of the things that came out that I've noticed is this focus on sort of fundamental skills, things like reading, I suppose, being able to articulate. Because what worries me is that might be another thing that might negatively affect how a school is viewed in terms of its pupil premium or free school meals students, is if that student isn't quite so good at articulating, or if that student's handwriting isn't very good and you are using books to make a judgment, because I know books are also being used. I don't know to what extent. I'm quite skeptical about using a book to make a judgment, if I'm honest. And I know that there's lots of evidence that is all triangulated together. I don't think they're using one piece of evidence as a deal breaker over anything else. But my point is, would that potentially negatively affect a disadvantaged student if you're doing student voice and they're not able to articulate what they're learning? For example, there seems to be quite a focus at the moment on students understanding, which makes sense, students understanding what they're learning, what they learned last lesson, and seeing the sort of context and intent of the lesson. But some students will be able to articulate that really well and others won't. And it might be that's those students who can't be the disadvantaged students.
That's why the problem is that when and I can compare, like the school I used to work in previously, was deprived area. Of course, I mean the kids had very, very little cultural capital, all that kind of things. They knew nothing. Whereas the school, I mean, at the minute, I can't remember the kind of stuff, talking about Canada, and I can't remember, I must have said Montreal was the capital of Canada, and kids straight away said, well, I see, you're wrong, sir, it's Toronto. Now, in my school, I could have said that Jakarta was the capital of Canada. Nobody would have denied it, but it is. So of course, that's why you can't. It's what you mean. Up to what point you can change that? And yes, So on the one hand, I understand that no complacency, and then all the kids need to have the same chance of success. But at the same time, it's a lot harder when you work with students where you've got to have so much input because they got zero cultural capital. Because in good schools, the parents will ask me, well, Mr. Burnham, do you think he needs a tutor? Could you tutor him? But all the parents care about their grades. In other schools, year 11 parents' evening, I have 3 kids, 3 parents coming to see me. I mean, and in my school now, it's like every single parent, and if they can't see you, they will complain because they care. So, that doesn't seem to be taken into account when they, that's what you're saying. You can't escape that. And I think it's a little bit disappointing that, that you'll get hammered for, at some point, because they say, well, your kids, do this, they don't.
A very wise HMI, when I just started, I was a bit of a rookie. I think I'd done 2 or 3 inspections, and I was sent with a very wise, very experienced HMI down in the West Country. And one thing she said to me, I have never forgotten. She said, very few people deserve hammer. That's exactly her words. Very few people deserve hammer. And that is true. The thing that Ofsted has not got right, and even HMI, because that particular inspector, and there's no names or anything like this, but she came into the inspector's room and then the first morning after break, she said, "That was excellent. I gave it a 2. And I said, "Might not excellent be more consistent with a 1?
Yeah.
And she wasn't going to change her mind on the basis of what a rookie had just said. But next morning, she came in to the inspector's room at break time and says, gave her a 1. Now, that, getting the balance between praising the best work and actually taking action where it's needed is very difficult. And I said they're trying to ride at least 3 horses at once. And if, for example, we've known for years that the schools are not doing well by all of the pupils, and we know which pupils they're not doing so well by, and there have been efforts made since the 70s to try and address this. Using inspection to do it is very difficult, because you're actually you might be putting more pressure on than somebody's sending something in here in the chat, but I'll try and finish that point. You can't do everything at once. You've got to find ways of making the point, writing a fair inspection report. And I think actually that there is a case for getting rid of the traffic lights and grades and writing an honest report. The English language is good enough for the top scientists, it's good enough for Darwin, as I said in a tweet. It's good enough for Darwin, it's good enough for Shakespeare, and it's good enough for the best inspectors like Sheila Brown, who's a wonderful, wonderful writer. Well, it should be good enough for school inspectors to be able to write a report in the King's English, that actually makes sense and gives a fair and full picture. But they've got to be given the means to do it. They've got to be given more means to get enough evidence to substantiate the judgments, to think what's really going on. And the real people who have been hammered, I'll tell you, since Ofsted started, have been the inspectors, because they've been expected to do a proper job and not given the means to do it. But that's another issue. Yeah, it does make sense. I've got a couple of things I'm going to do. First, I'm just going to say about Hachette learning before we go on. I do actually want to get into just talk about the toolkit in a minute before I forget as well. But Hachette Learning are our sponsors, guys, for this show. So if I should have probably mentioned earlier, if anyone's watching and wants to comment, there's another sort of 13 minutes or so. If you're watching this online and anything sort of popped into your head that you want to ask, if we don't have time in the show, then I can follow up those on social media, so just do get involved. I've got a comment that Tom's just put in, and we'll just talk about that, and then I just want to sort of read some specific bits from the toolkit and the descriptors that I find quite interesting. And I just wanted to ask you, John, about the secure fit model as against the best fit, or the whatever, I can't remember what the other one is, best fit model. But Tom is saying, John, do you honestly think the way do you honestly think things are way worse Ray Ofsted than they used to be? I see no difference myself. Still same old judgments and people thinking they know best. My parents were teachers in the 90s and the noughties. So what do you think about that? What do I think about that? Well, taking this on the chin, because I was once followed into a school by a TES reporter. I didn't know he was coming. And a lot of the teachers had negative comments about the process. Then they're saying, but nobody blamed the lead inspector. They don't blame me. But I'm thinking, I'm in charge of this blooming lot. These inconsistencies are something that I haven't been able to address. And I think that people used to say, well, it depends what sort of team you get. And it shouldn't depend on what sort of team you get. The standard and quality of inspectors is absolutely crucial. And one of the things that happened when Ofsted started is a lot of the best ones, the most experienced ones, got made redundant and replaced by middle managers. because they were cheaper and they'd do what they were told. So I don't know. I think that there's always been too much stress on inspection since Ofsted started. I will certainly agree with that. I've got a sheaf of letters from head teachers from schools that I've inspected suggesting that they weren't blaming me as an individual either, but you're conscious of your own limits. Some inspectors would keep their cards very close to their chest. They wouldn't be open with people. They told you not to give any feedback. I mean, they're stupid. It's just against the rules. And
that's definitely changed. I know at the end of the first day, there will definitely be some feedback, and I think there will be, and that's where, you know, for the sake of balance, and I do think it's fair to say, as I mentioned earlier, that the slightly more collegiate feel to it. Good. I mean, from my point of view as a teacher, it didn't feel any less stressful than it ever has. I've got to be honest. That they sort of said that what they did is they listed a load of lessons where they thought they could come for a learning walk, and I think they went a little bit off, or they didn't have enough time to get around everybody. But there were several times throughout the 2 days where I was expecting them to come in and they didn't arrive, which I suppose is how it is going to be anyway. The way I'd seen it is that I was going to prepare for every single lesson of that day. Unfortunately, I was there till 7:30 the day before, still planning. But to be honest, I do tend to spend 2 or 3 hours every evening planning anyway, because as a leads practitioner, I want to be, I don't want, if something goes south, and some of my lessons do go south, you know, I'm not saying I'm the best teacher in the world. This happens to the best of us, but I don't want that to be my fault that they're going south.
You know what you mean?
You know what I mean? So it's like, so I will put that effort in, because I mean, I'm not expecting that everyone will be able to. I work a lot more hours than my contract says that I should, although my contract is a bit different because it's a lead practitioner contract. It's not the 1265 contract. But anyway, but I just wanted to read this here, because I've just got this little descriptor here from the achievement sort of strand of the report, and it says here pupils lack the if it says here, this is for urgent improvement, so this is achievement is likely to be graded urgent improvement when any of the following apply. Pupils lack the foundations of communications, reading, writing, or mathematical knowledge, taking into account that some pupils with SEND may not establish these foundations. Gaps in foundational knowledge are not tackled quickly or effectively. So, I mean, when I look at that, I can't help thinking that who is that most likely to affect disadvantaged students? So that's just one little descriptor here. It says here, the pupils that the progress that disadvantaged pupils make is consistently well below that of other pupils nationally and shows little or no improvement. So again, comparing things to national, I suppose if you're comparing pupil premium or free school meal students with free school meal students somewhere else in the country, that might seem on the surface of it like a reasonable way to do things. But for me, it again, going back to what we said earlier, it doesn't tell the whole story.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you want to assess someone's achievement, you've got to have their starting point. You've got to have the right starting point for these pupils. You don't assume. I mean, people used to assume that anybody from a minority ethnic background was disadvantaged. And then they had pupils from certain minority ethnic backgrounds that were knocking spots off everybody else. So it was just too simple. You've got to be able to see, what are these students' starting points? And are they making progress? There's one thing, them not having some skills, and that's one thing. But if you're saying that they're not doing anything about it, then that is the problem. Because, you know, I mean, I came into education to teach people to read.
Fair enough.
You know.
I agree on that. I agree on that. I think, but you know, when you were talking about consistency, I think, I mean, the problem you have when you in any inspection is that everything can be challenged, really, because at the end of the day, most is opinion. The only thing that can be challenged is your outcome, because they figure. So you can always say, well, you know, no matter what you say, we're right, because at the end of the day, your outcomes are not good. And I mean, of course, being an average, you will always be below nationally. because someone needs to be above and people need to be below. So that's not I don't find that very helpful. And you're below, so because you're below, it's not good enough, and that's it. At the end of the day, that's it.
And this is my starting point, because when I started teaching reading, we had children in inner London in the 70s who couldn't read at all. If you gave them a test, they scored 0, and they came in with what was the notional reading age of 6. Now, if I worked my socks off, and I did, and my colleagues did in these reading units, to get their reading age up from 6 to 8 after a year, that's 2 years progress in a year, and we could do that sometimes, and we could sometimes even better than that. We work our socks off, but they're still, they're still behind the national average.
Yeah.
But you've got a fair inspection, and I was lucky. I got one. Actually, I got 3 inspectors seeing me at various times, and they were all very fair because they looked at what I was doing. They could look at what these children were achieving, and they could make a judgment accordingly. They weren't comparing them with some notional, because I tell you, the national expected standards based on guesswork anyway. They're not based on what children are actually achieving. They're based on what they think they should be. Well, yeah, I mean, I could expect to win the lottery, couldn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
we did. That's one thing about this.
Yeah, we did. I mean, yeah, like you say, Yannick, if you're talking about wanting everyone to be nearer or above average, that shows quite a fundamental misunderstanding about what an average actually is, doesn't it? So it's just and what a normal distribution curve looks like.
It's a number, and you can do something with numbers, whereas it's a lot harder to say something about someone's teaching that can be argued. You can all.
Well, I would pray that, and the thing that really made me get up in the morning and enjoy my work as an inspector was to see somebody hit the ball out of the park and then give them a full praise feedback and say exactly why that was so good. And there you had to know your work, because if you say something's excellent and it's just words, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you understand the work in order to make that judgment. And that's what made me enjoy being an inspector, because I could praise good work, and I wish to goodness there was the same emphasis on praising the best work that there is on correcting faults. You've got to do both, but I don't think Ofsted's ever been quite good enough at banging the gong for the very best work that we see.
No, and I feel generally in the profession, I've said this before in a show, I just don't think generally there is enough praise and enough I don't know, of that generally. It seems everything is very high pressure. Everything is very high expectations. And it's high stakes. But like I said, fundamentally, it doesn't seem to me like there's been a huge change. There's not been a monumental change. We've now got some colours. We've got this TripAdvisor, as you mentioned, John. We've got the TripAdvisor approach with the different colours. We've got an awful lot going on for just 2 days. I mean,
too much.
How could I suppose, what's the way forward? Is there any way you think Ofsted should scale it down? Is there anything that Ofsted are looking at? I mean, some people are saying things like attendance. Even we had Zoe Enser on, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying, because she said it live on air, that she was a little bit concerned about the fact that they'd put attendance in with behaviour, because obviously it's much harder to affect behaviour. I mean, a good school has got to have a system for managing behaviour of students. It's got to be said. People will probably look at and say, well, that makes me a trad. There's been a lot of this around. We're all trads. Teachers trad radio, right? Now, sorry guys, I wasn't going to go here, but that's ridiculous. When you work in a school and you see what happens when that school softens their behaviour approach, and I've seen it, and it does not end well. It really does not end well. So that's something that's absolutely fundamental. You can affect behaviour of students in school. You 100% can. What you can't really do is affect whether they turn up at school. Not really, not to the same level of impact.
Well, I'm glad you've had Zoe on, because Zoe's expertise in her subject, and she was lead HMI for English. And I asked myself a question: why is somebody of that quality leaving that organisation? Why has the lead inspector for maths left that organisation? Why has every subject and specialist, the people that, to give Amanda Spielman her due, because obviously her history has been a very sad one. But one thing she did was start to employ inspectors that knew what they were about. And I really, really regret losing these highly skilled people, because in the end, there's the personal quality of the person who comes into your lesson. Do they understand your work properly? Or are they just doing a walk round? Frankly, this called learning walk is no way to inspect somebody's lesson. They could come in halfway through a little problem, and I don't just mean a disciplinary problem. Somebody might be confused and then go out before they've heard the explanation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't inspect a bus ticket without looking at it, and you have a proper look at it. And then, you know, I had when I was inspected, and this back in the 70s, an inspector came in and he stayed for a lesson, which might be 35 or 40 minutes. And the first one that came in, I'll be quite honest, I was useless. In fact, I was worse than useless. And he went out giving me a very worried look, and quite right, because I was trying to teach drama and I didn't know how to do it. Well, next time he came, fortunately, I wasn't trying to teach drama, and I did have a bit of a better idea what I was doing. And, you know, he said that he gave a balanced account. You know, this, you must know that was just not right. And I did. This was much better. And then, you know, the last time I was seen, when I was teaching reading, which I'd like to think I'm a bit better at, I got a report that had my probation shortened, and I was put on a promotion list, and I got promoted to head of department very shortly after it. And that's what should happen. You've got to have people, and teachers are not treated fairly. They're not treated as fellow professionals. If someone wants to see, I mean, I've not had the pleasure of seeing either of you two teach. You haven't had the pleasure of seeing me teach. But we've got to have a sort of mutual respect on the basis of the inspectors understanding the work properly and communicating that to people and saying, well, we understand this. And this is, you know, don't be too hard on yourself sometimes. You're looking for perfection here. That doesn't happen. Because people who are teaching well aren't very often going to teach a bad lesson. They're going to teach one that's not perfect or not as good as they would like. That still doesn't mean there's anything particularly wrong with it.
Yeah.
You need nuance. And in fact, you need inspectors that know how to write a report and not just give a traffic light.
Yeah, I think teaching standards have definitely improved significantly since I started. You know, I was terrible when I started teaching, and I think there was people were getting away, I think, with Yannick's got his report from his early days of teaching there, John, where he's actually got his
took that away before we could read it, Yannick.
My 3 ticks.
Oh,
good, satisfactory, and unsatisfactory.
Oh,
First
well,
inspection, that was
I don't like that.
I know when neither did
I. I don't like that. I mean, okay, you can put this into words, and some words might be "don't do that again," which I did. Another word might be, you know, your relationship with them was we've all had a full praise statement at one time or another, but you just tick in a box saying unsatisfactory.
As I said, this was my first job in 2000, and we got inspected in something in November. I didn't have a head of department. I was okay. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was turning up.
Oh, you do now, yeah. I'm sure you do.
I'd take that all day long, to be honest.
I still struggle with Year 9 Spanish. You know, that was unsatisfactory. I still would be unsatisfactory with those Year 9 Spanish.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And it does depend. You know, they came into me a couple of weeks ago, and I had a very good class, and I was able to sort of show off a few things that I hoped that they wanted to see. But as you said, John, they were there for 10 minutes. It was a learning walk. I'm kind of with you on that. And I think a lot of schools have then employed that approach to their own monitoring as well, which I'm not really sure if that's the right way to go. But I think a lot of schools have done it like that. So literally, if I go to watch a lesson in my capacity as a lead practitioner, people will say, well, you can't stay any longer than 10 minutes. People will say, well, we've got to go now. And I'll be just getting into it. But that seems to be the way that we're going. We've gone a little bit over the hour, gentlemen.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. No worries. I don't think it's a big deal. I just want to thank you both very much indeed again for joining me this evening. I suppose really, is there a way forward? Where do we go from here? Obviously, I suppose we have to have a little bit of patience and see. Presumably, there will be some kind of review of the
I'd be retired by then.
You'll be retired by then. We could all be retired.
I'd be becoming like John.
Don't do that. You're doing much better than me.
No, I've already been there.
Oh, yeah, and Tony. Sorry, yeah. Well, at least you haven't got the name to match, Tony.
No, not yet. I get not names that people say to my face anyway. No,
because you see, John, you're still passionate. I think when I retire, I think I'd probably leave it all out. You know what I mean? I don't think I'd be interested anymore. But I don't know.
To be honest, Yannick, it's the reading. I'm teaching a young man to read. He couldn't read the word "the" because he was trying to sound it out one letter at a time. And we've now got to the stage where he's reading a book called Beasts of the Sea. He's finding that he can read long technical words more easily than he can short words sometimes because he's getting more information from the letters. I had a word like, and I'm not making this up, bioluminescent, he can read without any hesitation. It took me about 3 lessons before he got what right. And what I did was draw a silly hat, the top hat. What a hat! And that just about got me at the age,
And that's the thing.
Reading.
That's the thing that's amazing about what we do in our job. And I was thinking, as the grumpy old man that I'm turning into, about the credit that we give to things that are maybe not quite as important. If you watch an awards show, actors are being given awards, and I'm sure that some of them deserve them, and I'm sure they work hard. But then I think about, what about the doctor who removed the blood clot from my mother's brain when she had a stroke? What about the teachers? Who are teaching people literally to read? So the credit, we're talking about giving someone credit, and at the moment it doesn't seem like there's a lot of that to go around in our profession. And I think we just need a little bit more of that, a little bit more humanity. Is what we need, really. But we'll see where it goes from here. Right, thank you ever so much to John and Yannick for once again joining me. I'm sure we'll meet again, gentlemen, in the future. We'll see.
Try not to be late.
No worries. We'll see what happens with OFSTED and the new framework, everybody, and where we go from here. Like I said, the only thing that I suppose we could say is it's united many of us as a profession. The jury is very much still out on the new framework. It's not gone down particularly well in these early stages, but we'll see what happens. I just want to thank anyone who's joined us this evening and watched the show. Thank you so much for supporting Teachers Talk Radio and supporting the channel. If ever you want to come on, like John and Yannick have, and give up your time and to put across your point of view, what we pride ourselves in at Teachers Talk Radio is to give classroom teachers a voice. And that's something that I think is excellent from Teachers Talk Radio, to give us that voice and to have events like Teachers Talk Connect, which I went to, which was absolutely superb. I learned plenty of things there and met some amazing people. So thank you to everyone who has watched this evening. Hope you all have a relaxed evening. And we're nearly there. We've nearly got to Easter. So well done, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I'll see you in 2 weeks back here on The Twilight Show. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.